Hey, I'm Emma. Welcome to Revenge Pulse, where every story hits different. Hit subscribe and let's dive in. The manila envelope arrived on a Wednesday, 6 months after my father's funeral. I was sitting in my apartment in Arlington, Virginia, drinking coffee and preparing for another day of remote work, when the mail carrier knocked. Certified mail. Required signature. The return address was Department of Defense, Naval Personnel Command. My father had been dead since March. It was now September. I'd assumed all the military paperwork had been processed. The flag from his coffin sat folded in my closet. The death certificate was filed. The obituary had run in the papers, but this envelope felt different. Heavy. Official. Important. Inside was a letter on navy letterhead and a smaller sealed envelope marked, to be opened only by LCDR, Thomas Garrett S., next of kin only. The letter was formal. Dear Ms. Garrett, pursuant to Naval Personnel Regulations regarding classified service members, we are forwarding materials that were held in secure custody pending final determination of beneficiary status. Your father's service record contains elements that remain classified. The enclosed materials are released to you under strict confidentiality agreements outlined in attached documentation. Disclosure of classified information may result in criminal prosecution. My hands shook as I opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a key, the kind that opened a safety deposit box, and a single card with an address in Baltimore and a box number. Nothing else. No explanation. No context. Just a key and an address. I looked at my calendar. I had meetings until 3, but after that, I called my boss. Family emergency. I need tomorrow off. She didn't ask questions. I'd been a solid employee for 3 years. I had the PTO. The next morning, I drove to Baltimore. The bank was small, old, the kind of place that had been operating since the 1950s, with marble floors and brass fixtures and tellers who actually knew their customers. I presented the key and my ID. A woman in her 60s examined both carefully. Garrett, she said. Thomas Garrett. My father, he passed away in March. I'm sorry for your loss. She looked at me over her reading glasses. You understand this box has been here since 1987. 37 years. I didn't know it existed until yesterday. Your father paid the rental fees annually, in cash. In person, she led me to the vault. He was here in February, 2 weeks before he passed. February, Dad had seemed fine in February. We'd had dinner. Talked about his garden, his plans to finally take that trip to Ireland he'd always wanted. He had died on March 3rd. Heart attack. Sudden. He was 71. The woman left me alone with the box. It was medium size. Heavy. I opened it. Inside was a stack of documents, several journals, photographs, and a DVD in a plastic case marked for Carolyn Watch alone. Carolyn, that was? I took everything back to my car and drove to a coffee shop. Sat in the corner with my laptop and headphones. The DVD was home recorded. The quality was grainy. It showed my father sitting in his study at home, the one he'd had for as long as I could remember. But he looked younger. Maybe 60? This had been recorded 11 years ago. Caroline, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were sad. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if the Navy sent you to the safety deposit box, it means they've determined you have clearance to know certain things. He took a breath. What I'm about to tell you is classified. It's been classified for 43 years. But you deserve to know, especially if your mother tries what I think she'll try. My mother, they'd been divorced since I was 12. Messy divorce. Bitter. They hadn't spoken in 23 years except through lawyers. In 1981, I was a lieutenant commander in naval intelligence. Dad continued. I was assigned to a joint operation with the CIA. Code name, Blue Harbor. The mission was classified then and remains classified now. But you need to know the basics. He pulled out a photograph, held it to the camera. This is my team. 7 of us. Operation Blue Harbor. We were tracking Soviet naval movements near Iceland. Our job was to intercept communications and provide intelligence to NATO forces. The photos showed 7 men in naval uniforms. Young, serious. Dad was third from the left. The operation went wrong in November 1981. We were compromised. 3 team members were killed. The rest of us barely made it out. He set the photo down. One of the men killed was Jamie Winters. Lieutenant Jamie Winters, age 26, married. His wife was pregnant. He paused, looked directly at the camera. His death was ruled an accident. Equipment failure during a training exercise. That's what his wife was told. That's what went in the official records. But Caroline, it wasn't an accident. Jamie was murdered by someone on our team. My coffee had gone cold. I couldn't move. I've carried that knowledge for 43 years. I couldn't tell anyone because the entire operation was classified. Jamie's widow, Lisa Winters. She never knew the truth. She believed the accident story. She collected his military pension, raised their daughter alone. And I lived with the guilt. He looked older suddenly, tired. Your mother knows some of this, not all of Italiano, but enough. We divorced because of what I couldn't tell her, what I couldn't explain. The secrets I had to keep. She resented it. She thought I was having an affair, but the truth was worse. I was covering up a murder. My father's hands were shaking on the video. I'm telling you this now because I've left my entire estate to you, my pension, my savings, my house, everything. Your mother is going to contest the will, Ikino says. She's going to claim she deserves a portion of my military pension as my ex. She's going to fight you for it. No. He leaned closer to the camera. If she does, if it goes to court, you need to use what I'm giving you. In the box, you'll find my journals from Blue Harbor. Coded, but I've included the cipher. You'll find evidence, names, dates, and you'll find one name that matters. The name of the person who killed Jamie Winters. He was quiet for a long moment. Your mother's maiden name was Lisa Crane. When we married in 1978, she was Lisa Crane. But before that, Caroline, before I met her, she was married to someone else. For 3 years, from 1975 to 1978, my stomach dropped. Her first husband's name was James Winters. Jamie? He went by Jamie. No. Your mother was Jamie Winters' widow. She was Lisa Winters. And she never told me. I didn't know until after we were married. Didn't know until 1982, a year after Jamie died, when I found their wedding photo in a box she'd hidden. The video showed my father crying. She married me in 1978, 3 years before Jamie died. She left him, divorced him. He was devastated, and then in 1981, he was killed on an operation. I led an operation where I was responsible for his safety. He wiped his eyes. I don't know if she knew. I don't know if she somehow orchestrated it. I don't know if it was coincidence. But Caroline, I spent 43 years wondering. And I could never prove anything. But if she comes for my pension, if she tries to take what I've left you, then you have the right to know. The video ended. I sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours, staring at nothing. I spent the next week going through the documents. Dad's journals were detailed, meticulous, every entry coded. But with the cipher, I could read everything. November 14, 1981. Mission compromised. Someone leaked our position. Jamie went to investigate the communications equipment. It exploded. Jamie killed instantly. Looked like equipment failure, but I examined the wreckage. Someone tampered with it. Someone on our team. November 18, 1981. Investigation ruled it an accident. Case closed. But I know what I saw. The detonation trigger was modified. This was murder. December 2, 1981. Can't tell anyone. Operation is classified. If I report the murder, the entire mission becomes public. Soviet agents would be exposed. American assets would be compromised. National security above all. Jamie's death must remain an accident. June 5, 1982. Found Lisa's wedding photos. She was married to Jamie Winters. My Jamie Winters, she never told me. We've been married for 4 years and she never mentioned she was a Navy widow. Never mentioned her first husband died on a classified mission. Is this coincidence? Or something darker? September 3, 1982. Confronted Lisa. She claims she didn't know Jamie and I served together. Says it's a tragic coincidence. But how could she not know? How could she marry me, another naval intelligence officer, and not mention she was married to one before? I don't believe her. The entries went on for years. Dad's suspicions, his inability to prove anything, his decision to stay quiet to protect national security, his growing resentment and distrust of my mother, their divorce in 2001. The final entry was dated February 18, 2020, for 2 weeks before he died. I'm 71. I don't have much time left. Lisa will contest my will. I know she will. She's been asking about my pension for months. Calling after 20 years of silence, asking about my estate plans. She knows I'm leaving everything to Caroline. And she's going to fight it. So I'm giving Caroline the tools she needs. The truth about Blue Harbor, the truth about Jamie. The evidence. If Lisa wants my pension, she'll have to answer for what happened 43 years ago. Even if I can't prove she was involved, I can make sure Caroline knows. And maybe, just maybe, the truth will finally come out. I closed the journal and cried. The lawsuit came in October. Just like Dad predicted, my mother, Lisa Garrett Crane Winters, was contesting the will. She claimed she was entitled to a portion of my father's military pension as his ex-spouse under the Uniformed Services Former Spouses Protection Act. Her attorney argued that despite the divorce, she'd been married to my father for 23 years and was entitled to a percentage of his military retirement benefits. My attorney, a young woman named Rachel Kimura, reviewed the case in her office. She has a legitimate claim, Rachel said. The USFSPA allows for pension division in divorce cases. If they divorced before the pension payments were divided, she can petition the court now. They divorced 23 years ago. Why wait until now? Because your father is deceased. The pension converts to survivor benefits. The total value is now calculable. Rachel looked at the numbers. We're talking about approximately $847,000 in total survivor benefits over expected payout period. Your mother is claiming she's entitled to 50%, $423,500. Can she win? Honestly, probably. Unless we can demonstrate that she's not entitled to the benefits for some legal reason. Was there a prenuptial agreement? No. Was the pension addressed in the divorce? I don't think so. They had a quick divorce. My dad wanted out. He didn't fight for anything. Then, she probably has a case. I thought about the safety deposit box. The journals. Deo. What if I have evidence that she might have been involved in something that would disqualify her from receiving military benefits? Rachel's eyebrows went up. What kind of evidence? Classified evidence about a military operation in 1981. Caroline, classified evidence is complicated. We can't just introduce classified materials in civil court. What if I could get it declassified? That takes years and a lot of government approval. What if I don't need to introduce the evidence? What if I just need to mention the right names to the right people? Rachel looked at me carefully. What exactly did your father leave you? I told her about Blue Harbor, about Jamie Winters, about my mother's first marriage, about the name that I suspected was in those journals, the name of the person who killed Jamie Winters. Rachel was quiet for a long time. If you make accusations like that in court, you need to be absolutely sure, because if you're wrong, your mother could sue you for defamation. And if the information is classified, you could face criminal charges for disclosure. I understand. Do you have proof? Real proof. I have my father's journals. coded, but readable with the cipher he left me. Is there a name in those journals? Of the person who killed Jamie Winters? I nodded. Who? I told her. Rachel went pale. Oh my God. The hearing was scheduled for November 15th, 8 months after my father's death. Mom showed up in a black dress and pearls. Widow? Cosplay. She hadn't seen my father in 23 years, hadn't spoken to him in more. But here she was, playing the grieving ex-wife. I wore a simple navy suit. Professional.com. My mother's attorney, a man named Robert Whitmore, presented their case first. Your Honor, Mrs. Garrett was married to Commander Thomas Garrett for 23 years. Throughout that marriage, Commander Garrett served in the United States Navy, earning a military pension. Under the USFSPA, Mrs. Garrett is entitled to a portion of those pension benefits, which now convert to survivor benefits given the commander's passing. The judge, a woman in her 60s, named Judge Patricia Brennan, reviewed the documents. The divorce was finalized in 2001, Whitmore continued. At that time, pension division was not addressed in the settlement. However, Mrs. Garrett maintains her right to petition for those benefits now. She is entitled to 50% of the marital portion of the pension. Rachel stood up for our side. Your Honor, Commander Garrett's will clearly states his wishes. He left his entire estate, including all benefits, to his daughter, Caroline. There is no ambiguity. Wills can't supersede federal law, Whitmore countered. The USFSPA grants rights to former spouses regardless of what the will states. Judge Brennan nodded. That's correct. Mr. Whitmore, you're arguing that Mrs. Garrett is entitled to benefits under federal statute? Yes, Your Honor. And you have documentation of the marriage? Yes, Your Honor. Marriage certificate, divorce decree, all standard documentation. Judge Brennan looked at Rachel. Ms. Kimura, do you have any legal grounds to deny Mrs. Garrett's claim? Rachel glanced at me. I nodded slightly. Your Honor. We believe there are circumstances that would disqualify Mrs. Garrett from receiving military benefits from Commander Garrett. Whitmore laughed. Your Honor, this is a desperate stalling tactic. What circumstances? Judge Brennan asked. Circumstances related to Commander Garrett's military service, specifically, a classified operation in 1981. The room went very quiet. My mother's face didn't change, but her hands tightened on her purse. Whitmore stood up. Your Honor, Ms. Kimura is grasping at straws. Classified operations have nothing to do with pension division rights. Your Honor, Rachel said, Commander Garrett left his daughter documentation regarding his service. Documentation that reveals information pertinent to this case. We request the opportunity to present it. This is absurd, Whitmore said. You can't introduce classified information in civil court. We're not introducing classified information, Rachel said. We're introducing questions about circumstances that may disqualify Mrs. Garrett from receiving benefits. Judge Brennan frowned. Ms. Kimura, I'm not inclined to allow fishing expeditions based on vague circumstances. If you have specific, relevant, admissible evidence, present it. Otherwise, I'm prepared to rule in favor of Mrs. Garrett. This was it. The moment Dad had prepared me for. I stood up. Your Honor, may I speak? Rachel looked at me, alarmed. Judge Brennan raised an eyebrow. Ms. Garrett, you're not an attorney. I know, Your Honor. But I have information that my attorney can't present because of classification issues. However, I can speak to matters of public record and personal knowledge. Whitmore was on his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. Judge Brennan looked at me. Ms. Garrett, I'll give you 2 minutes. But if this is a waste of the court's time, I'm ruling against you immediately. Understood, Your Honor. I walked to the center of the courtroom. My mother was staring at me. Her face was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Your Honor, my mother was married to my father from 1978 to 2001. 23 years, but before that, she was married to someone else. From 1975 to 1978. Her first husband was Lieutenant James Winters, Jamie Winters, U.S. Navy. My mother's face went white. Jamie Winters died in November 1981 during a classified naval operation. His death was ruled an accident, equipment failure during a training exercise. His widow, my mother, received his military death benefits and pension. Whitmore was shaking his head. Your Honor, this is irrelevant ancient history. I'm getting to the relevance, I said. My father, Commander Thomas Garrett, was the commanding officer on the operation where Jamie Winters died. The operation was called Blue Harbor. It was a joint Navy-CIA intelligence operation near Iceland. Judge Brennan's pen stopped moving. My father documented everything about that operation. Before he died, he left me his journals, coded journals that detailed what really happened in November 1981. Your Honor, Whitmore tried again. Mr. Whitmore, sit down and let her finish. I looked directly at my mother. Jamie Winters' death wasn't an accident. My father believed he was murdered by someone on the team, someone who tampered with communications equipment and caused it to explode. My father couldn't report it because the operation was classified. He couldn't tell Jamie's widow the truth. He couldn't tell anyone. My mother's hands were shaking now. And then, in 1982, my father discovered that his wife, my mother, was Jamie Winters' widow, that the man who died on his operation was her first husband. A husband she'd never mentioned, a marriage she'd never disclosed. This is slander. Whitmore stood up. It's not slander if it's true, I said. I have the marriage certificate. I have the divorce decree. I have documentation of Jamie Winters' death benefits being paid to Lisa Winters, who later became Lisa Crane, who then became Lisa Garrett. Judge Brennan was leaning forward now. Ms. Garrett, where exactly are you going with this? I took a breath. My father spent 43 years wondering if his wife, my mother, somehow knew about Blue Harbor, if she somehow influenced what happened to Jamie Winters, if their marriage was coincidence or something more calculated. That's a serious accusation, Judge Brennan said. I know. And I can't prove it. The operation is still classified. But, Your Honor, I can prove that my mother collected death benefits from Jamie Winters' military service, and then married another naval intelligence officer without disclosing her first marriage, and now she's claiming benefits from that second marriage. Benefits from a man who spent 4 decades suspecting she might have been involved in her first husband's death. The courtroom was silent. My mother stood up suddenly. This is insane, Caroline. I don't know what your father told you, but Jamie Winters wasn't an accident, I said. Loud, clear. My mother dropped her water glass. It shattered on the floor. Judge Brennan stood up. Immediate recess. Everyone in my chambers. Now. In Judge Brennan's chambers, things moved fast. Ms. Garrett, the judge said, closing the door, you just made an extremely serious implication in my courtroom. About a classified military operation, about a potential murder, about potential fraud. You understand the severity of what you've done? Yes, Your Honor. Do you have evidence to support these claims? I have my father's journals. I have documentation of my mother's first marriage. I have. Do you have proof that Jamie Winters was murdered? No, Your Honor. Not admissible proof. The operation is classified. Whitmore was pacing. Your Honor, this is a baseless smear campaign. My client married Thomas Garrett in good faith. She had no obligation to disclose previous marriages. She collected death benefits from a military service member, I said, and then immediately married another military service member without disclosing it. That's fraud. It's not fraud unless she was receiving benefits from both simultaneously, Whitmore shot back. The timing is suspicious, Rachel said. Commander Garrett died in March 2024. Within 6 months, Mrs. Garrett filed to claim his pension benefits. But she never disclosed that she'd already collected death benefits from another military marriage. That pattern suggests nothing. Whitmore Said. Judge Brennan held up her hand. Everyone stop. She looked at my mother. Mrs. Garrett, did you disclose your first marriage to Commander Thomas Garrett when you married him? My mother's voice was tight. I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question. We didn't discuss it in detail. Did you tell him you were a military widow? Silence. Mrs. Garrett. It was painful. I didn't want to talk about it. But you were collecting death benefits from your first husband's service when you married your second husband? For a few years, yes. The benefits eventually ran out, and you never disclosed this to Commander Garrett. He never asked. Mrs. Garam, Judge Brennan said coldly, you married a naval intelligence officer without disclosing that you were the widow of another naval intelligence officer who died under classified circumstances. I didn't know the circumstances were classified, but you knew he died in service. Yes, Judge Brennan looked at me. Ms. Garrett, you said your father believed Jamie Winters was murdered. Do you know who he suspected? This was the moment. The name was in Dad's journals, but I couldn't say it. Not without but I could say something else. Your Honor, I can't disclose classified information, but I can tell you that my father documented his suspicions in journals that are now in my possession. Coded journals, and I can tell you that he believed someone with access to the operation was responsible. Someone on the team? Yes. Do you believe your mother was involved? I believe my mother knows more than she's saying. I believe her marriage to my father was not coincidental, and I believe my father left his estate to me specifically to prevent her from benefiting from his death the way she benefited from Jamie Winters' death. My mother made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Your Honor, Whitmore said, this is all speculation based on the paranoid fantasies of a man who clearly had trust issues. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Brennan said quietly, shut up. She looked at my mother. Mrs. Garrett, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Did you have any knowledge of or involvement in the circumstances that led to Jamie Winters' death? No, my mother whispered. Did you know that your second husband was the commanding officer on the operation where your first husband died? Silence. Mrs. Garrett. I found out later. After we were married. When? A few years in, maybe 1981 or 1982. And you didn't tell him you knew. I was afraid. I didn't want him to think. She stopped. Think what? Think that I'd married him because of Jamie. Judge Brennan sat back in her chair. Let me make sure I understand. You married a naval intelligence officer, later discovered he'd been the commanding officer on the mission where your first husband died. And you never disclosed this information to him. I didn't know how, and now, 23 years after your divorce, you're claiming benefits from his estate. I'm entitled to those benefits, are you? Judge Brennan's voice was sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, Mrs. Garrett, this looks like a pattern. You collect benefits from one military husband's death, marry another military officer without disclosure, divorce him, and then immediately claim benefits from his estate after his death. That's not entitled. That's calculated. Your Honor. Whitmore tried to interrupt. I'm going to continue this hearing, Judge Brennan said. I'm going to order a full investigation into Mrs. Garrett's claims, and I am going to contact the Department of Defense to inquire about Operation Blue Harbor and whether there are any ongoing investigations into Jamie Winters' death. My mother's face crumpled. Furthermore, Judge Brennan continued, until this investigation is complete, Mrs. Garrett's petition for benefits is denied. Ms. Caroline Garrett retains full control of her father's estate as outlined in his will. Your Honor, you can't. Whitmore started. I just did. This hearing is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, my mother cornered me. Caroline, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You used Jamie. You used Dad. And you were going to use me. That's not you loved your father. You loved his rank, his clearance, his access. I looked at her, really looked at her. Did you know? When you married him? Did you know he was Jamie's CO? She looked away. You did, I said. You knew. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I was young. I was scared. Jamie died and I had nothing. Your father was kind, it was stable, he could give me security. So you used him. I needed him, and when he figured it out, when he started asking questions, you resented him for it. You made his life hell. You divorced him, and now you want his money. I'm entitled. You're not entitled to anything, I said. You collected from Jamie's death. You can't collect from Dad's too. The law says you have to be honest. You lied. You withheld information. You defrauded the military. I never defrauded. You collected death benefits from one military marriage while marrying another military member without disclosure. That's fraud. My mother's face twisted. Your father poisoned you against me. He told you lies. He told me the truth. Finally, after 43 years of carrying it, alone. He was paranoid. He was right. Primera, Walaked Hawaii. She called after me. Caroline, please. I'm your mother. I stopped. Turned back. You were my mother. Until you decided Dad's pension was more important than the truth. Now you're just someone I used to know. The investigation took 6 months. The Department of Defense reviewed Dad's journals. With proper clearances and legal procedures, they declassified portions of Operation Blue Harbor. What they found confirmed everything. Jamie Winter's death had been suspicious. The investigation in 1981 had been cursory. Equipment failure was the easy answer. The classified answer, the answer that didn't require difficult questions, but Dad's journals provided new evidence, detailed observations, technical analysis, testimony that had never been officially recorded. In March 2025, exactly 1 year after Dad's death, the Navy reopened the investigation into Jamie Winter's death. They called me in to provide testimony, not as a witness to the death. I was born in 1993, 12 years after it happened, but as the custodian of my father's documentation, I sat in a secure facility in Washington and told them everything I knew about Blue Harbor, about Dad's suspicions, about my mother's marriages, about the name in Dad's journals, the name of the person he believed killed Jamie Winters. Commander Richard Sawyer, Dad's second-in-command on Blue Harbor, the man who'd been found dead in 2019 of an apparent suicide, the man who'd left a note confessing to mistakes made in service, the man whose death my father had always believed was not suicide but something else, something darker. The Navy investigator, a woman named Captain Rebecca Walsh, listened carefully. Your father believed Commander Sawyer murdered Lieutenant Winters, she asked. Yes. Why? Because Sawyer had access. Because Sawyer was present when the equipment was tampered with. And because Sawyer was having an affair with Jamie's wife. Captain Walsh's pen stopped. Say that again. My father documented a relationship between Commander Sawyer and Lisa Winters' May mother, beginning in 1979, 2 years before Jamie died, while Jamie was still alive, while my mother was still married to him. And you have evidence of this? I pulled out photographs from the safety deposit box, photos Dad had collected over the years, photos of my mother and Richard Sawyer. At Navy events, at parties, close together? Too close. Oh my God, Captain Walsh said.
She shows excellent judgment, clear reasoning, and perfect reality testing. There is no medical basis for questioning her competence. Meanwhile, I continued my performance at home. I knew they were watching, so I gave them exactly what they didn't want to see. A completely competent, organized, capable woman, managing a complex business and living independently with perfect competence. I also started preparing for the confrontation, because Raymond had discovered something else. Marcus and Rebecca had scheduled a family meeting for 2 weeks from now. Emma had overheard them planning it. They were going to present me with papers to sign, supposedly just estate planning documents, but actually giving them power of attorney. If I refused, they planned to file the emergency guardianship petition immediately. They think they have enough footage, Emma told me during a brief call from a burner phone. Uncle Marcus keeps saying they have a slam-dunk case. Let them think that, I told her. Let them keep thinking they're in control. But I was also planning something they'd never expect. The confrontation wasn't going to happen in my home, on their terms with their cameras recording. It was going to happen at the Riverside Hotel's Grand Ballroom during the annual Castellano Property Management Appreciation Dinner, an event I hosted every year for my tenants, contractors, and business associates. 200 people would be there, including several reporters from the local business journal, and including, though my children didn't know it yet, Detective Sarah Martinez from the Elder Abuse Division, Judith Brennan, Raymond Ortiz, and Garrett Mitchell. When I burned my children's scheme to the ground, I was going to do it with an audience and overwhelming evidence. They wanted to take away my competence, my autonomy, my life's work. I was going to take away their freedom. The Riverside Hotel ballroom glittered with lights and conversation. I'd spared no expense this year. The annual appreciation dinner was always elegant, but this year it had to be perfect. This year it had to be memorable, because this year it wasn't just a dinner, it was a trial. I wore my best dress, a deep navy that David had always loved, pearl earrings, my hair professionally done. I looked like what I was, a successful businesswoman who built an empire through decades of hard work. Marcus and Rebecca arrived together at 7, both looking surprised by the scale of the event. "Mom," Marcus said, kissing my cheek, "this is quite a production. Isn't this a bit much?" "It's our 44th anniversary as a company," I said warmly. "I wanted to celebrate properly. You both remember most of these people, contractors we've worked with for years. Long-term tenants, business associates." Rebecca scanned the room with a slight frown. "You planned all this yourself." The implication was clear. Surely I was too incompetent to organize such an event. "With help from my assistant Jennifer," I said. "But yes, I've been planning it for months." Emma arrived a few minutes later with her parents, Derek and Lisa. Emma caught my eye briefly, and I gave her a small nod. She knew what was coming. She'd helped plan it. Dinner was served at 7:30. I made small talk at the head table, laughed at jokes, demonstrated perfect social competence. I could see Marcus and Rebecca exchanging looks. They hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected me to be so capable, so present, so clearly in command. Good. Let them be confused. At 8:15, I stood to give my speech. The room quieted immediately. "Thank you all for coming," I began. 44 years ago, my husband David and I bought our first property, a rundown duplex that no one else wanted. We were young, broke, and probably crazy, but we had a vision. I spoke about building the business, about the values David and I had shared, about honest work and treating people fairly. The audience was rapt. I'd always been a good speaker, and tonight I was at my best. Then I shifted tone. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about legacy, about what we leave behind, about who deserves to inherit what we've built. Marcus shifted in his seat. Rebecca's smile had frozen. "I've also been thinking about trust, about family, about how sometimes the people closest to us can betray us in ways we never imagined." I clicked a remote, and the large screen behind me lit up. 6 months ago, my children began installing surveillance cameras throughout my home without my knowledge or consent. 12 cameras in total, including in my bedroom and bathroom. Gasps rippled through the room. On the screen, a schematic of my house appeared with red dots showing camera locations. Marcus stood up. "Mom, what are you?" "Sit down, Marcus." My voice was ice. "You wanted to document my incompetence? Then let's look at your documentation." I clicked again. The screen showed split-screen video on the left, one of the edited videos Marcus and Rebecca had created.
I used some of it to pay off my student loans, to buy a small house in Arlington, to set up a trust for any future children I might have. But most of it, $750,000, donated to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. In memory of Lieutenant James R. Winters, the donation funded scholarships for children of fallen service members, kids who'd lost parents in service, kids who deserved to know their parents died with honor. Kids like Amy Winters. In November, I got a letter from her. "Dear Caroline, I received your donation to the Relief Society. My father's name I don't know how to thank you. I've spent 51 years believing he died in a training accident, believing he was careless. The Navy told me the truth 3 months ago. He was murdered by someone he trusted because of a woman who didn't deserve his love. Your mother? I'm sorry you have to carry that, but I'm grateful you brought the truth forward. My father can finally rest. Thank you, Amy. I wrote back. We started corresponding. Email at first, then phone calls. Then, in December, we met for coffee. She looked like her father. The photos I'd seen from 1981, she had his eyes. His smile. Thank you, she said, for everything. I didn't do much. You did everything. You gave my father justice. You gave him truth. You gave him his story back. We talked for hours. About our fathers. About her kids. About the complicated legacy of secrets and service. Your father was a good man, she said finally. He carried my father's secret for 43 years. He couldn't tell anyone, but he never forgot. And he made sure you could finish what he started. He loved the Navy, but he loved the truth more. That's what makes a hero, Amy said. Christmas 2025. 2 years since Mom's lawsuit started. 1 year since the truth came out. I spent it alone in my new house. Well, not quite alone. Amy and her family came to visit. We had dinner. Her kids my sort of cousins, if you stretch the definition played in the snow in my yard. We toasted Jamie and Dad. And the truth that had finally set them both free. On Christmas night, after everyone left, I sat by my fireplace and read through Dad's journals one more time. The last entry, written 2 days before he died. I'm dying. I know I am. My heart is giving out. The doctor says weeks, maybe a month. I'm ready. I've lived with these secrets long enough. Jamie, if there's an afterlife, I'll see you there. And I'll apologize in person for not saving you, for not speaking up sooner, for protecting a murderer in the name of national security. I did what I was ordered to do, but it was wrong. And I'm sorry. Caroline will make it right. I've given her everything she needs. She's stronger than I ever was. She finished this. Justice is slow, but it's coming. Finally. Tom, I closed the journal and stared at the fire. I finished it, Dad, I said to the empty room. Justice came, just like you said. The flames crackled and danced, and for the first time in 18 months, I felt peace. Epilogue. In March 2026, 3 years after Dad's death, the Department of Defense issued a formal apology to the Winters family for the cover-up, for the lies. For 44 years of calling a murder an accident, Jamie Winters' name was added to the Navy Memorial. His rank was posthumously advanced to Lieutenant Commander. His family received full honors. And Operation Blue Harbor, partially declassified, became a case study at the Naval Academy. About the cost of keeping secrets, about the importance of truth, about the difference between protecting national security and protecting wrongdoing. My mother was never charged with a crime. The evidence was circumstantial. Her involvement couldn't be proven beyond reasonable doubt, but her reputation was destroyed. The military community knew, and they never forgot. She moved to Florida, changed her name, disappeared into retirement. I never spoke to her again. In May 2026, I gave a speech at the Navy Memorial for the dedication of Jamie Winters' name on the wall.
Their attorney, Richard Vance, was disbarred pending investigation. The Bar Association launched a full review of his previous guardianship cases. 2 of the 3 families whose parents had been placed in care filed lawsuits. My children's trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. Garrett Mitchell testified about the video manipulation, showing frame by frame how they'd fabricated evidence of my supposed incompetence. The jury watched the split-screen comparisons, seeing exactly how my children had lied. Dr. Torres testified that I showed no signs of cognitive decline. Dr. Chen confirmed I was in excellent health. Judith presented the neuropsychological evaluation showing superior function. Raymond Ortiz testified about Marcus's embezzlement and Rebecca's financial desperation, establishing clear motive, and Emma testified about what she'd overheard, about finding the surveillance software on her mother's computer, about the conversations she'd witnessed. She was 19 by then, composed and clear-eyed on the witness stand. She looked at her parents without flinching and told the truth about everything they'd planned. Rebecca sobbed through most of the testimony. Marcus sat stone-faced, occasionally glaring at Emma with such hatred that the judge had to warn him. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Marcus received 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement of client funds, plus an additional 7 years for the conspiracy against me, to be served consecutively. 15 years total. His financial advisor license was permanently revoked. He was ordered to pay $340,000 in restitution to his clients plus $150,000 to me for damages. Rebecca received 6 years for conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. Derek received 5 years for his role installing the surveillance equipment and participating in the scheme. Both Rebecca and Derek lost their real estate and insurance licenses. Their house went into foreclosure during the trial. They lost everything. Richard Vance was ultimately charged with conspiracy in my case and 2 of his previous cases. He received 10 years and was permanently disbarred. The day of sentencing, I sat in the courtroom and watched the judge deliver his verdict. This court has rarely seen such calculated cruelty toward a parent, Judge Morrison said. You didn't just attempt to steal from your mother. You attempted to steal her autonomy, her dignity, her freedom. You planted cameras in her most private spaces. You manufactured evidence to paint her as incompetent. You were willing to institutionalize her, to strip away everything she'd worked for, purely for your own financial gain. He looked directly at Marcus and Rebecca. You will have years in prison to reflect on your choices. I hope you spend that time understanding the gravity of what you attempted. Marcus showed no emotion. Rebecca cried. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. After the sentencing, reporters surrounded me on the courthouse steps. Mrs. Castellano, how does it feel to see your own children